Welcome to Caregiving Club On Air. This podcast is dedicated to the millions of family caregivers who want wellness tips and self-care solutions, who seek expert advice, and who want news about healthy aging and how to create well home design in our forever homes. I'm Sherri Snelling, a corporate gerontologist, author, and educator, a TV interviewer, host, and news commentator. I'm joining you from Southern California, where our interviews and news take us all across the country to explore the many ways to help you on your caregiving journey and to lift you up here at Caregiving Club On Air. Welcome to Caregiving Club On Air, and our first of 2 episodes for November to celebrate National Family Caregiver Month. We're also going to talk to 2 great guests who are going to tell us about wonderful resources that caregivers can access for free, and also how to get paid as a caregiver. We're going to talk about some campaigns that help caregivers tell their personal stories. We're going to talk about the sandwich generation and special challenges of those particular caregivers. And we're also going to talk about daylight savings and how we need to think about the lighting for our homes and for our loved ones. And finally, we're going to wrap up with a commentary on a new documentary coming out from actor-director Bradley Cooper. I'm Sherri Snelling, and welcome to our first November National Family Caregiver episode. As I mentioned, we're going to have 2 great guests. Our first guest is Sandy Markwood, who is the CEO of U.S. Aging. U.S. Aging is actually a government agency that oversees all of the local area agencies on aging, as well as other community partners. And she's going to tell us a lot about what this resource means to caregivers. It's really kind of the first responder, if you will. When you start your caregiving journey, this would be the first call, the first resource you want to look at, because they can help you with so much. And she's going to tell us about how they help people in national disasters, like we just saw recently with the hurricanes. We're going to talk about a new caregiver marketplace that they've launched and a whole lot more. And then we're also going to talk to Max Mayblum, who is the CEO and founder of Givers. And Givers is a new organization that is helping guide caregivers on how they can actually get paid to care for their loved ones, which is the question that comes up all the time. So that's going to be a really fascinating conversation as well. And then, as I mentioned in Caregiver Wellness News, as we talk about National Family Caregiver Month, we are going to drill down on some of the changes that have happened in caregiving, do a quick little commentary on the presidential campaign. Both of the candidates right now have initiatives to support family caregivers, which is wonderful to see. I'm going to talk a little bit about the sandwich generation and a Wall Street Journal article that recently came out about the sandwich generation challenges. Then we're going to talk about 2 campaigns, one from the Caregiver Action Network called I Care, and the second one from the National Alliance for Caregiving, which is called Portraits in Caregiving, and it's all about how to share your personal stories and your personal journey through caregiving with other caregivers and other advocates out there. And then we are going to talk a little bit about my book, Anytime Monday. I have a chapter on the 7 A's of caregiving. I'm going to share that with you. You can also watch that as a video, part of our Self-Care in 7 Minutes video series that we have on YouTube. And then as we switch into well home design, as I mentioned, daylight savings is coming November 4th. And what that means is we're going to have more darkness earlier in the day. And so we're going to talk a lot about what do we need to do both in our own homes, but specifically in the homes of our older loved ones? What do we need to think about when these time changes happen and it's darker earlier? What's the lighting, which is so necessary, particularly for older adults living at home? And then we're going to talk about a new app from Samsung, which is creating a really wonderful connectivity and communication for family caregivers. And then finally, we're going to wrap up with heartthrob actor and director Bradley Cooper, who has a brand new PBS documentary coming out. We're going to talk a little bit about that and tell you kind of where and when you can watch. And it's all just really exciting to see all of this focus and attention for National Family Caregivers and National Family Caregiver Month. So with that, let's take a look at our Caregiver Wellness News. So for our Caregiver Wellness News, I want to start with, of course, November being National Family Caregiver Month. And I wanted to start with what I wrote about in my book, Me Time Monday. I had a chapter called Caregiving Redefined. And I talk about how, we often look at demographics when we look at aging and psychology and behavior patterns in society. And those generational terms are things like baby boomer, Gen X, Gen Z, millennials. And so what I write about in the book and caregiving being redefined is we really have a new generation, and it's called Generation Caregiver, Gen C. And it's really not about age or race or geography. It's really about psychographics. It's about behaviors and attitudes and needs. And this is really where we need to focus when it comes to family caregiving. The other thing is, caregiving is being redefined. I've been in this arena, if you will, for the last 20 years. And what I've seen over the last few years in particular is this definition of caregiver now being used more broadly. It's being used to define parents, particularly when we're talking about workplace caregiving. When we say caregivers, it means anyone who's caring for a young child, all the way through caring for a spouse or an older parent or even a grandparent or whomever. So it's really across our lifespan that we are caregivers. And if you think about it, we start life being cared for, we end life being cared for. Then in between, we're the ones providing the care to different loved ones and different people that we have in our lives. Something funny I wrote about in the book is I saw a TV commercial the other day that even talked about and used the word caregiver to talk about pet owners. So if you have a pet, you're a caregiver. But, being more serious, the caregivers are really, I've talked about this before, they're our largest national volunteer army for long-term care. 53 million Americans are providing care to a loved one who is over the age of 18. So that does not include all the parents out there. Now, 24 million of that 53 million are what we call the sandwich generation. And that means you are caring for children, typically under 18, but it can also be kids maybe who've come home from college and are still under your roof and you're still paying for pretty much everything. But at the same time, you're also caring for an older parent or in-laws or grandparents or other loved ones. And I have a great article in the Wall Street Journal that talked about the challenges now of the sandwich generation, which half of Gen X are sandwich generation caregivers, which is pretty huge. And we have a lot of millennials now who are sandwich generation. And way back when, as I said, I've been in this a long time now. I was part of what was called the White House Middle Class Task Force, which was an advisory group that was created and gathered by President Obama. It was actually under Vice President Biden at the time, and it was back in 2009. And they just had a lot of listening sessions with different thought leaders out there. And this is when I was actually working for a large health insurance company, and I was kind of the family caregiver expert. And we talked a lot about the sandwich generation and what those challenges were. And so I'm going to have a blog on my website. I won't talk about it here. As most of you know who listen to me, I'm not political. I don't really believe in getting involved too much in politics. I leave that to the advocates and others in Washington, D.C., who do a great job advocating for family caregivers. But I did feel it was important to point out, because we have this really tight presidential election coming up, that both Trump and Harris have approaches to support family caregivers, very different approaches, but all the same, it's wonderful to see both campaigns being out there talking about family caregivers. That's the great news, because in years past, there hasn't been as much attention on family caregivers as a hot topic, if you will, in our particular presidential election. So that's the good news. Now, going back to the numbers, 11 million of those 53 million caregivers we were talking about, 11 million of them are caring for someone with dementia or Alzheimer's. As you guys know, I do a lot of work in that community. It's a very kind of different caregiving experience because of the nature of the disease, where it's not just about memory loss. It is about a change in behavior and personality. And obviously it progresses and gets much worse over time. There's also 3 million children under the age of 18 who are involved in caregiving. They're either the primary caregiver for a parent or sometimes a grandparent. or they're the backup caregiver to maybe their parent for their other parent. Or perhaps, again, it might be a grandparent. In fact, one of the number one reasons that these children become caregivers is Alzheimer's. So we're really seeing this affect, not just people who are in their older years, their 40s and their 50s. I mean, this can affect children as being caregivers. And then 3 million grandparents are also out there caring for the primary caregivers for their grandchildren for a variety of different reasons. We see a lot of this, by the way. A lot of the grandparents are in the African American community. And so there are special needs and special considerations for those older caregivers who are still trying to take care of these young kids. And so we've got 5 generations involved in caregiving. Everybody from, as I mentioned, we got our Gen Z youngest so far, all the way up through the silent generation, because we also see people who are in their 70s caring for parents who might be in their 90s because we're all living longer. So caregiving is broad. It's being redefined. We need to look at it in different ways. And I want to just point out 2 really great campaigns for National Family Caregiver Month. One is from the Caregiver Action Network. Again, a great nonprofit organization based in Washington, D.C. And they have a campaign during November called I Care. And it's about self-recognition and self-identity as a caregiver. One of the things we know is we don't identify as family caregivers. We're adult daughters or sons, or we're a spouse or a partner or a friend or a sibling. We're not a quote-unquote caregiver. We always think of that as being a healthcare professional. So this is trying to highlight and get people to self-identify. And then once you identify, that opens up the doors to all of this really wonderful support that is out there. It's just a matter of knowing it's out there and finding it. And so they give you also a lot of really great guides on how to talk to, for instance, your loved one's doctor, how to talk to if your loved one is in the hospital, how to talk to either that ER doc or, the nurses when you have emergency care, how to talk to the insurance company and understand the language of Medicare and Medicaid, how to talk to pharmacists, but also how to talk to your work supervisor or colleagues, how to talk to friends and other family members, and how to, open up and have support from faith leaders. So really great guides that you can find on their website. We will have that, by the way, on our episode guide page, links to all of this. And they also do something called the Caregivers and Action Insights panel, where you can share your personal care journey. And then this becomes a go-to source for a lot of policymakers when they're looking at holding these congressional hearings. You talk to different, like the Senate, Aging Committee on what's happening. They will tap into, if you want to, they will tap into looking at these databases and maybe contacting people to be involved in that. And also the media can use it as a resource. Now, the other group, which is really great, and I'm very close and have been associated with the National Alliance for Caregiving way back when I was on their board. And they just do really wonderful work. They're also, again, based in Washington, D.C., and they do a lot of the really wonderful research. In fact, the kind of the seminal research that comes out about caregiving every 5 years is from the National Alliance for Caregiving, but they also do a lot of other policy work and working with different organizations and different initiatives. And one of those is Portraits in Caregiving, which is a campaign, again, around sharing your story as a family caregiver. And their focus is on translating the lived experience of caregivers into policy and innovation efforts, and to have this be a hub for the stories that they can share across their network. So again, when a lot of people who are in the trenches trying to figure out what are the best resources, what are the best services that we can create for family caregivers, they want to hear these stories. They want to hear what your experience is so they can really shape this in the right way and do the best good that they can with a lot of these services that they're providing. So again, National Alliance for Caregiving, we're going to have that link on our episode guide page. Really great organization, and we'll shout out to them. Now, I mentioned my Me Time Monday book. I have a chapter on what I call also the 7 A's of caregiving. I'm not going to take the time here because I want to get to all of our guest interviews, which are so wonderful this episode, but I'll just tell you that we also have this in video format. It's part of our Self-Care in 7 Minutes video series on our YouTube channel. So you can listen to the video and see some of the visuals I have. But basically the 7 A's, and you guys know from my book, The Power of 7, it's kind of explained in the book, but I always try to kind of default into what are the 7 tips, what are the 7 minutes, what are the 7 ways we can do things for self-care, for caregiving. But it's the 7 A's are accept your caregiving will adapt, because we do have to adapt. We don't have to get rid of things we love doing, but we do have to shift it up a little bit and adapt. We have to act. Okay, so sometimes we are a little bit in denial that things are happening to our loved ones, and that we're in this this new caregiving journey, this new role. We also have to ask, right? We have to ask, and we have to reach out to the family and friends, to the work environment, to the resources that are out there that are going to help us. We have to assess, we have to get a perspective that this is going to be a marathon, probably not a sprint. And we have to get our resets going. Again, that is part of that adaptation, but assessing every day how things are changing, because the caregiving journey on average is about 4.5 years. If you're caring for someone with dementia or Alzheimer's, the average is 9 years. It's a long time. And that means we do, and it changes, because the care needs often grow in scope. They don't get less. And so along that journey, we're going to have, we need to learn new moves, if you will, find those resources that'll help us. And then abandon. Well, we want to live with abandon, right? That's the good spin on abandon, but we don't want to abandon our self-care needs. That's the biggest thing I write about in my book, is that balance. How do caregivers do this extra work we want to do, right? We lovingly provide that care often for our loved ones, but it also takes away then some of the other things we love and the other things we love doing. But how do we not abandon all of that? How do we bring that balance back into life? So that's the abandon. And then the last A is applaud. And again, this episode is dedicated, all my episodes actually are dedicated to family caregivers, but particularly during November, National Family Caregiver Month, we applaud you. We are grateful and thank you for being that national volunteer army that, is often overlooked and is overwhelmed, is unpaid, but we're gonna give you some tips on that part. But we really do thank all of the family caregivers out there, because without you, the healthcare system would literally collapse. But it is a role that so many of us will play, as we've seen, in redefining caregiving in our lifetime. So with that, this is a great segue into our interview with Sandy Markwood, who is the CEO of US Aging. And as I mentioned, that is a government agency as part of the Administration for Community Living, which is under the Department of Health and Human Services. And Sandy's organization has a lot of fantastic programs, but they also then coordinate and kind of bring together all the local area agencies on aging that deliver those local services to family caregivers, to older adults, to help them primarily to stay living independently at home. But also, we can, the agencies guide you on other things as well. Actually, everything from A to Z. And you're going to learn that from this interview with Sandy. And FYI, I mentioned up front, Sandy and I have known each other now for over 20 years. We've been in the trenches of caregiving for a long time, and she really knows her stuff. But the wonderful thing that she's going to emphasize is a lot, in fact, all of this information that you can get through US Aging and through the area agencies on aging is free. We love that word, free. So with that, let's listen in on this great interview with Sandy Markwood of US Aging. So I am really thrilled to have our guest on this episode, who is Sandy Markwood, the CEO of US Aging. And she's going to tell us what US Aging is all about, but also the local members that US Aging really has within their organization to help family caregivers. And just as a little side note, Sandy and I were just talking, we've known each other now for over 20 years. So we've been in the trenches of caregiving for a long time. So Sandy, welcome to Caregiving Club On Air.
Oh, Sherri, thank you. It's wonderful to be here.
Well, it's great to talk to you as well. And as I told you, we always start our first question with, where are we talking to you from today?
Well, you're talking to me from Alexandria, Virginia. I've been on the road, but I'm actually in my home office today.
Which is probably unusual to find you actually at home.
It is. Usually I'm in our office in Washington, D.C.
Great. Well, Sandy, as I mentioned, US Aging plays such an essential role in the lives of older adults and family caregivers. So tell us a little bit about the organization.
Sure. U.S. Aging is proud to represent the nation's 614 area agencies on aging. And we also advocate in Washington, D.C. for over 250 Title VI or tribal aging programs across the nation. So our members are really charged with providing a range of services and supports targeted to keep older adults living at home and in the community with dignity, independence, and a sense of safety and security. And that being said, it is really key and critical as their membership organization that we support them in advocacy and also in training and technical assistance so that they can serve older adults better, but also because our members operate the National Family Caregiver Support Program, critical to our mission is serving our nation's family caregivers.
It's so important. And you mentioned that your members are these actual agencies that a lot of people may have heard, area agencies on aging. And so, obviously all of those agencies kind of come up under your umbrella for the programs and things that you do. Tell us a little bit about, I know there's programs that U.S. Aging does, and particularly to support those members, but also tell us, what do the local area agencies on aging, what kind of services and help do they provide to family caregivers?
Well, area agencies on aging provide core services, again, targeted to keep older adults and actually more and more people with disabilities as well at home and in the community. And all of these services are critical to supporting family caregivers. So it could be nutrition, so either home delivered meals or meals that are provided in a congregate setting like a senior center. Medically based transportation so that people can get rides to the doctor, but also the pharmacy. And then also looking at home modification, looking at in-home services and supports, chore services, legal assistance. There are so many critical services that area agencies on aging provide for older adults. But also, as I mentioned, they also operate the National Family Caregiver Support Program. So in that capacity, they provide education, recognizing that nobody really planned to be a caregiver, and there's so much to learn on how best to provide that level of care, support services, support groups, also critical respite services so that caregivers can get a break. And then also there are emergency funds to support caregivers when they find themselves in crisis and trying to meet the financial needs of caregiving.
Well, and it's so critical, really, if for those listeners who are out there listening to Sandy, it's really kind of an A to Z, will help guide you to finding the right local resources or supports, or help you figure out maybe how to get things paid for, if there's free access to different things, which is so essential. Sandy, tell me a little bit about, how many lives do you impact throughout the year, particularly with the National Family Caregiver Program? How many people are reaching out to you to get that help?
In saying that, Sherri, we're not even sure because, through the National Family Caregiver Support Program, we know that there are millions of caregivers that are getting a range of services and supports for their loved ones or for themselves. But in looking at some of the statistics from the Older Americans Act, it's like millions of rides every year, 250 million meals. This is a network that's out there for all of the caregivers that are listening that they should go to first. Find out what your area agency on aging is, because they are there to support your loved ones and to support you through, as I said, whether it's home delivered meals, medical transportation, home modification, home repair, all of these services and supports that are really critical to ensuring that your loved ones can remain living safely at home and in the community.
Well, and again, it is such an important, service, because as you and I both know, We don't often plan for caregiving, particularly of our older loved ones. And so we're in a crisis and we don't know where to turn. We've always had your phone number and your website on our podcast episode guides, because I always tell people, no matter what resources we're giving you, this is probably the first place to start. So Sandy, I want to switch gears a little bit and have you talk about, we just recently experienced these horrific disasters with Hurricane Helene and also Milton, really devastating a lot of the communities, throughout Florida, Georgia, Tennessee, North Carolina. What role or what type of help can the area agencies on aging provide to families in those situations, particularly if you've got an older loved one who maybe was living at home, either alone or didn't have extra help in those situations?
Well, Sherri, I was just in my travels down in the Southeast and really hearing firsthand the struggles of the older adults in the communities. And what we know is older adults are usually those who are most hit in any type of disaster. And so area agencies on aging step in to ensure that people get the necessities, to get meals, to get water, looking at providing support, and looking at housing assistance or emergency housing assistance. Oftentimes people have lost everything. They've lost their house, they've lost their clothes, they've lost their medication. AAA's really step in and be able to support people in any way possible. And to help area agencies on aging in these disaster related areas, US Aging has a disaster fund that we fund through membership and also corporate support, and also our friends, to help us provide funding assistance to areas impacted by disasters. And there's no administrative fees that we have as part of this at all. What we do is give directly to the area agencies on aging, and they give directly to those in need in their community. No strings attached.
Well, and that's a really important point. I want to kind of have you reemphasize that, because a lot of times I talk to, different experts or organizations, but you have to sign up, become a member yourself as a family caregiver, maybe pay a subscription fee. But really, all of this access and wonderful guidance for free. So tell us a little bit more
Exactly.
how that works.
Well, Sherri, given the fact that area agencies on aging provide their funding sources are either federal grants, local, state, or local funding, so it's not a means-tested program. Also, we also contract through area agencies, contract with healthcare to provide social care to members of many healthcare payer groups. So, but all of this is at no charge to the older adult or to the caregiver. So again, it should be the first place that you look to for that level of support.
Well, absolutely, because you're going to be able to guide them on all of these different things. Whereas we know you might be able to find, an answer or help here, but it doesn't cover all the other things that you really need. You guys are really kind of the one-stop shop. When we were talking about disasters, one of the things that we know is a lot of the fraudsters, the scammers come out of the woodwork after a natural disaster. They're preying upon people's emotions and that desperate feeling that you have. What do you see in terms of kind of this elder financial abuse? And are there any words of guidance, or do you help older adults and families kind of navigate those, keeping away from those scammers?
Sherri, with the recent disasters, the scammers are already out there. And it is such a shame. And unfortunately, so many people get taken in by them. But because it is such an issue, every year US Aging does we call our Home for the Holidays campaign. It's an opportunity to get information out in the public's eye, but through our area agencies on aging to older adults and their caregivers about the scope of these scams, which are horrendous. So information and materials on the Home for the Holidays campaign, which is looking at preventing scams, is going to be available on our website next week. And also we are giving the information to area agencies on aging, hoping that they put it in local newspapers, because the holidays, in addition to disasters, the holidays are a prime time that older adults that anybody gets scammed. So it's an important issue and one that we're
Absolutely.
hoping to address.
Yes. Well, and again, really just getting that word out, I think raising that awareness is such a, an important note. Now you recently, and I don't know when I say recently, I think it's been over the last year or so, but you can correct me. You've launched something called the Caregiver Marketplace, I think is what you're calling it. But you're now working with different companies, service providers to kind of have a place where caregivers can go and then also be able to, find these services. So tell us how that works and what that's all about.
Sure. Well, we believe in the children's arena, there's a saying that, it takes a village to raise a child. Well, we think it takes a village to be able to ensure that we value and support older adults across their lifespan. And that means coming together with the public sector, the nonprofit sector, and the private sector, all working together and working hand in hand to be able to, again, look at older adults as assets, but also to respond to their needs. So the corporate marketplace is an opportunity for us to work with the private sector to help them develop services and supports that really meet the needs of older adults and caregivers, and also then to get that information out into the field so that people can use it.
And so would, if I'm a family caregiver listening, do I just go to your website and I'll be able to kind of, get engaged with these companies through that access, or how does that work?
You can see on our website the companies that are engaged in the marketplace, and then also, but usually what we do is we partner with our area agencies on aging. So again, the first focal point, which should probably be the area agency on aging, and they can help you navigate the services and supports that you need in the public sector, nonprofit, or also in the important private sector. In saying that, what's really key and critical, Sherri, about the area agencies on aging is that they case manage. They recognize if you have one need, you probably may have other needs, and they do wraparound services and supports to ensure those needs get met.
And Sandy, that's such an important point because again, when we go into caregiving, we're not very well prepared often. We don't know what's coming or what services we might need. And what you're really doing is not just saying, okay, you have a question on this and I can help guide you, but have you thought about this? Or you may, need this. So it's really this comforting service. It really kind of wraps caregivers in. Here's your new world, and we'll help you navigate.
Yeah, in saying that, Sherri, one of the prime services that area agencies on aging provide is really information referral. You can call an area agency on aging and tell them what your needs are. They'll probe a little to see if you have additional needs, but then they connect you at the local level to services and supports to meet those needs. Now, a lot of people that may be listening may not know how to contact their area agency on aging. And for that, we run a national call center called the Elder Care Locator that will help you if you call the locator or go to their website. That will help connect you to your area agency on aging. And I'd be happy, Sherri, to give the number for that, which is 1-800. Okay, 1-800-677-1116. Again, it's 1-800-677-1116. Or if you want to go to the website, it's www.eldercare.acl. It's a government website, .gov. And they will only refer you to vetted services and supports to meet your needs as a caregiver or your care recipient.
Well, which is nice too, because again, if you do your own internet search, you're not sure if it's the best or the most cost efficient. So having that kind of expert give you that peace of mind is great. And we will have that in big letters on our episode guide page. We'll have that all spelled out. And we'll have you on every episode guide page because, again, you are the resource. Of course, of course. As we were talking, Sandy, obviously, as family caregivers, we are often seeking, like you said, maybe it's transportation, maybe it's meal delivery, help here or there. But there's also kind of this whole new movement in social determinants of health and making sure that our older adults, particularly if they're solo agers living at home alone, that they still have social engagement. Can you talk just a little bit about how you look at that? And are those the types of things that you can also make sure that family caregivers get connected to?
Oh, absolutely, Sherri. What we have seen even before COVID was an increase in older adults who are socially isolated or lonely. And COVID really put a spotlight on it, but it still exists. So, US Aging supports our members with an innovations hub around social engagement ideas to ensure that older adults and caregivers who are also socially isolated because of their caregiving experience really have an opportunity to engage in a meaningful way and a fun way to be able to ensure that their social engagement needs are met. So that actually social engagement has become a core service of area agencies on aging across the nation.
Well, and you also touched on something we're talking a lot about finding those services for maybe your older parent or grandparent or in law, but you also do help the family caregivers. I mean, we know the burnout rates, we know the stress, and the feeling lonely ourselves as caregivers. So you really help the caregivers as well.
Right, exactly. And we help our members help the caregivers. We are so lucky that we have a number of different technical assistance grant programs around innovations in caregiving. We have the Community Care Corps that we're a partner in that provides grants to communities to develop programs that are non-medically based to help caregivers. Grand family, kinship care, technical assistance and training for those grandparents who are raising grandchildren. And we're so excited too about a new grant that we have, which is focused on caregiver navigation, recognizing that caregivers are so stressed that you really need support to be able to navigate the service that exist in the community to meet your loved one's needs as well as yours. And then there's the important space of dementia, where caregiving is extremely stressful. And we operate with the Alzheimer's Association, a dementia respite innovations program, as well as Dementia Friendly America and Dementia Friends USA, looking at ways to support individuals who are on that journey of living with dementia, but also their important caregivers, and how to ensure that people can live well with that disease at home and in the community. And we know that 80% of people living with dementia are living in the community.
And I think you're highlighting such an important point as our listeners are listening. There's so much that you are helping, and obviously it's the local areas agency on aging can help, and it's just stuff we don't know. So, and I know that you're not a counseling, service, but just having a voice you can talk to and somebody who is empathetic and understands your needs, I think is so vital to family caregivers.
Thank you. I mean, we hold dear in our network being the trusted resource at the community level to meet the needs of older adults, but also to meet the needs of their important caregivers.
Yeah, which is so critical. I know we're running close on time, but I did have a question on technology, Sandy. There's so much talk out there now about artificial intelligence and robotic, care bots and, all kinds of things. And some of the technology is certainly, very helpful and wonderful. But what do you see in terms of the trends in technology, and how is that being integrated into the types of help and resources and services that you can guide caregivers to?
Well, I think technology has a critical place to play in meeting the needs of older adults and caregivers, whether it be smart technology in the home to ensure that people are safe, healthcare monitoring technology, looking at utilizing tablets and virtual technology to be able to ensure and support social engagement. But Sherri, technology can't support or replace that personal touch. And what we're really looking at in the Aging Network through Area Agencies on Aging and Title VI is blending technology to meet the needs that they can, but also to ensure that the eyes in the home, that there is someone on the other end of a telephone or at your door to really ensure that your needs are met. So it's blending the two. It's not a one or the other.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And, we've seen throughout studies that so many of us have turned, obviously, to digital technology. We use it every day in our lives, but sometimes we have to get back to that in real life, kind of interactions, not having everything be digital or URL, but in real life is so critical. So Sandy, I just, again, I think what your organization and all the triple A's out there, all the agencies that are helping older adults and family caregivers is so essential. You guys are the first call. You're like the first responders, I would say, when someone becomes the caregiver. Is there anything else we didn't cover that you feel is important for the audience to know?
Well, I really think that one, I commend caregivers because you're doing the heroic work. But know that there is support at your community level and seek that support before you get into a crisis. Area agencies on aging, and there are other community-based service providers that are out there to help you. Seek that help because you deserve it.
Well, thank you for that note. That's a great way to end. We're going to be doing this episode during November National Family Caregiver Month. I can't think of anybody better to talk to, Sandy, than you. So tell us again, just so our listeners have this, where they can find information and get help through US Aging and also the local area agencies on aging.
Sure. The first place to go to is the Elder Care Locator. As I said, that number is 1-800-677-1116. A live person will answer the phone. And also, if you wanted to go online, www.eldercare.acl.gov, or you can always go to US Aging's website, which is www.usaging.org.
Which is so vital. So again, Sandy, thank you so much for being on this episode. It's wonderful to chat with you. We really appreciate all your insights and your support for family caregivers.
Sherri, thank you so much. Wonderful to be here.
Isn't that a great interview with Sandy? And now I hope you know that the Elder Care Locator and all of the things that US Aging and the area agencies on aging too are so helpful to family caregivers. It really should be kind of your first call, your first place to go for different resources. Now we're going to shift gears because one of the questions that I get asked all the time when I'm out there speaking, I just did a national book tour. I always get asked, can I get paid to be a family caregiver, to care for my loved one? Which is a great question, right? Because sometimes we give up a lot of our time. I do most of my work with employers. So I'm focused on caregivers who are in the workplace, who are employees, but also caregiving for loved ones. One of the things that we found in a study that was done by Harvard Business School a few years ago is that about 1/3 of the executives who are in kind of that mid-level, upper level, even C-suite, 1/3 are leaving their jobs and taking a leave of absence to care for family members. And of course, when you do that, there's a lot of financial implications. But this whole concept of getting paid to care for your loved one, obviously we don't do it to get paid, but it certainly helps, particularly in the kind of economy and things that we're feeling right now, certainly helps, right? Because we're also digging into our own pockets for a lot of those costs. And we won't go down that road because we're going to talk more about financial caregiving in January again. But this is a really great interview because Max Mayblum, and he's the CEO and founder of Givers. And there's a lot of other companies, I shouldn't say a lot. There are a few other companies out there that are also helping guide caregivers to how they can get paid. But Max, his whole focus is on this, and he's really, it's a great service. Their website is very easy to navigate. Their customer service is really great. The people who help guide you are very intelligent. A lot of them have been family caregivers, so they've been through the trenches, but they understand how to interpret different things. And they really uncover ways that you can become, get more help financially as a caregiver, and particularly maybe how to get paid. Because there are some nuances. You can't just necessarily have your loved one pay you because there could be some barriers to that. You're eligible with Medicaid and all that. But Max is going to tell us all about that. So here is my interview with Max Mayblum of Givers. So I'm really excited to have our guest on this episode because so many of you have emailed me and I get a lot of questions about, can I get paid to be a caregiver for my loved one? So we're going to answer your question today because we have Max Mayblum, who is the CEO and founder of Givers. And he has a service that helps us figure out how we can get paid to be caregivers. So Max, welcome to Caregiving Club On Air.
Thanks for having me on. I'm happy to be here.
Well, you have such great information to share with us. And as I said, this is a question that comes up again and again, when I'm out speaking and from our podcast listeners and all that. So we're excited to hear from you today. But first, as we ask all of our guests, where are we talking to you from today?
I am in New York, and that's our headquarters. And we serve people across the country, but we're based in New York.
Oh, fantastic. We love New York, one of our favorite cities. So, Max, when we kind of were exchanging emails and I came across your service and I thought it was really fantastic, but tell us a little bit about, first of all, what was your inspiration to start Givers, and then tell us what Givers is all about.
Yeah, so I've spent most of my career in digital health, and I was at my previous company building a telehealth solution to help make care more accessible to people in rural areas and sort of underserved populations. And I had moved in with my family during COVID. And unfortunately, early on, my aunt was diagnosed with terminal cancer. So I saw my parents put their lives on hold to make caring for her their number one priority. And it was the first time I had ever been exposed to the experience of family caregiving. I didn't even really know the term. I knew that it was happening kind of behind the scenes, but seeing it up close and personal made me realize how intense and difficult it can be for families who are in this situation. And so I was spending my days building this telehealth company at my last job. And at night, I would work to do whatever I could to support my parents as the caregivers for my aunt, looking for solutions for them, for any resources that would help them. And what I ran into was a litany of 404 pages and clunky insurance portals and difficult to navigate systems and support. And so very quickly, I had realized there's a huge broken system for the way we support family members. And I was in that role of supporting a family caregiver. And so as I started to build something to help my family through the situation, I realized there was an opportunity to scale what I was building to everyone across the country. I obviously learned how big the population is of family caregivers, with over 53 million Americans taking care of their loved ones. And I also saw up close and personal how intense it was. So I just saw a really big opportunity to make an impact on a really stressed and I think underserved population in family caregivers. And that's when I started Givers back in 2021. And fast forward to today, what we do at Givers is we enroll, support, and pay family caregivers through government programs.
Yeah. And, you mentioned the 53 million. We always talk about it being the largest volunteer, unpaid, overlooked army of healthcare workers in our country. And what I think is so interesting is, and we all know this as family caregivers, like you said, it's a patchwork quilt of services. You don't know what you don't know. You don't even really know the questions asked sometimes. And a lot of people don't realize the services and programs and things that are out there to support them. So walk us through a little bit, because you both connect caregivers to the programs that can help get them paid, but you also help them navigate, if there's going to be a contract, let's call it, between, grandma or grandpa or, your father wants to pay you to be a caregiver. There's certain nuances to that. So tell us all of the services really that Givers helps caregivers navigate and guides them through that process.
So you've got this exactly right, which is we do have a quilt, sort of patchwork of systems and support available for caregivers. And that was one of the first sort of areas of hope, but also opportunity that I saw as the founder of Givers was, on one side, there are solutions and support systems available for caregivers. On the other side, they're really difficult to access. In many cases, people aren't aware of them. And so that's part of the solution that Givers built, which is early on, we actually centralized every single program that'll support a family caregiver across the country. And so no matter where you are in any corner of the US, in any zip code, highly populated or a super sparse rural area, you can come to our website at joingivers.com, answer a few questions. It looks kind of like a TurboTax. Tell us who you are, tell us who you're taking care of, tell us where you are, tell us about the situation. and we're going to actually find you a personalized recommendation of programs that are available to you and that you might be eligible for. And then beyond that, we'll actually tell you how to apply. So if you need to call a specific number, if you need to fill out a form on a website, if you need to, email an office, we'll give you the contact information that you'll need so you can kind of get your foot into the door for the programs that are available to support you. And that was a huge task for us because, as you could imagine, there's hundreds of programs across the country. But for us, centralizing that information was really core to our mission, which is about lowering the stress that family caregivers face outside of the care for their loved ones. We have a saying at Givers, which is that the burden of caregiving itself, of caregiving, is not the care itself, but it's all the things that surround it. And when I was in the shoes of a caregiver with my own family, I saw it firsthand, which is that, there was nothing more that we would have loved to be doing than sitting with our aunt and taking care of her. It was having to step out of the room and make the phone call or go on an insurance portal or do some paperwork. That was the difficult stress of being a caregiver, and especially when time is limited.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And for someone like me who hates paperwork, it's like it's enough to just send you over the edge, right? And you're right. We want to spend our time with our loved ones, not filling out forms and doing all these things. And even, as you know, and this is why your service is so valuable for all of our listeners, is that even if you can find some of these portals and some of these programs that may pay you, then filling out the paperwork is not only time consuming, but confusing, and it's not intuitive and all of that. And you hit upon something I think that's really critical, and that is that certainly there are national, federal programs, but then a lot of the things might be more local or might be under maybe a Medicaid, which is a federal program, but it's administered by each individual state. So, it's helpful also for long distance caregivers to maybe tap into what Givers can help them with. Because you might be living in, California like me, but your parents are in Florida. So tell us a little bit about maybe some of the nuances of those state by state programs, and what are some of the ways? I mean, just give us kind of some top line things that people can think about in terms of, getting paid or getting reimbursed for the wonderful care they're providing.
Yeah, so I'll go through a few different avenues that people can go down, and I'll start sort of at the federal level, and then we'll work to the local level. So at the federal level, there's unfortunately not too much by way of getting paid as a caregiver, but what I would say is no matter where you are in the country, you may be eligible for some tax credits. And so there's a child and dependent care tax credit. And if your loved one is considered your dependent, you can actually earn a tax credit for your caregiving expenses. And so that's something to be aware of at the federal level. And then sort of getting more local, you're right in that Medicaid is one of the biggest programs to pay and support family caregivers. So for those who need the refresher, Medicare is the federally funded health insurance for older adults over 65. Medicaid is the federally funded health insurance for lower income individuals across the US. While it's federally funded Medicaid, it is administered at the state level. And so every state's going to have its own rules and versions of programs to support patients and support family caregivers. And so at the state level, if you're taking care of a loved one who is on Medicaid, you might be eligible to access a program that allows you to get paid as their caregiver and also receive some sort of support, some coaching, some training, etc. And then the other thing I'll mention just by way of support that's available for caregivers is sort of a little known resource, but a really great, powerful one, which is area agencies on aging. So these are federally funded, locally run government entities that provide support to family caregivers through the form of respite care, sometimes financial assistance, counseling, training. So you can go to your area agency on aging, which is located somewhere within your region. Most states have a number of them. And you can ask them what's available for family caregivers in your region and get some really nice personalized support that's kind of local to your neighborhood. So I would say those are sort of the big buckets of support for family caregivers. Where Givers operates is really in the Medicaid space. So the programs that allow caregivers to get paid through Medicaid, we partner with those family members who are taking care of a loved one on Medicaid to help them through that enrollment process And then once they've been enrolled, we're their provider who actually allows them to get the support, coaching 24/7 through our app, training, and then also get payment where they can access that through our app as well.
Well, thank you for mentioning US on Aging. We're actually going to have Sandy Markwood from US on Aging, who's the, kind of the national oversight, national organizer of all the different area agencies on aging that you mentioned. And yeah, they are great resources. But again, a lot of caregivers don't even know they exist, right? And so it's just getting that word out and guiding people to the right place. I wanted to ask you a question because we're talking about actually getting reimbursed for maybe the time, the care that we're providing. But do you also look for ways for kind of free services? Like I know, for instance, if your loved one is a veteran, then there's 30 hours, I think, still of respite benefits built into the VA caregiver program, where as a family member, you can have someone come in, be a companion to your loved one while you get a little break here or there, and you can get 30 hours a week. So do you also guide to those types of services and programs?
Yeah, sorry, that was a big sort of miss in my answers. There are great veteran benefits, and so that's another option. So if you're taking care of a veteran, you may be eligible either to access a respite program through them. Also, the VA does offer some caregiver programs that allow family members to get paid. So yes, as you answer the TurboTax sort of questions on the Givers website, we'll ask if you're taking care of a veteran on top of what other benefits your loved one is receiving, whether it's Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, and we'll then be able to find out sort of what programs are most relevant to them, including VA benefits.
Yeah, and it's amazing to me. I don't know about you, but so many people forget that the VA may offer help to you as a caregiver or to your loved one, and even though your loved one has been a veteran, they don't just seem to make that connection. So I don't know if that's something that you've seen as well with the people that are contacting you.
Yeah, I think the theme overall, which you had mentioned early on, is not knowing the right questions to ask. And one of the first messages I always give to family caregivers is ask for support and know that there is support available to you. Even if you don't know what that support is, go and look online, talk to a friend, talk to a local resource, whether it's your area agency on aging or the case manager of your parents or loved ones' health insurance. Ask what's available because there are supports available. The only thing that you'll have to do to get started is really ask what's there.
Now, you also touched on something I think is really important. You mentioned training. And I'd love for you to give us a little bit more insight on that, because again, as family caregivers, let's say your loved one's being discharged from the hospital, you might get a little bit of, coaching from the discharge, planner saying, okay, think about this or call this service or whatever, or this is how you do wound care, but not a lot. And it's hit or miss. And so what is the training that Givers actually provides to family caregivers?
Yeah, I mean, the reality is when you're taking a family member home from the hospital, you might not have the mental bandwidth to remember that quick lesson that you got, or that little brochure that they handed you just isn't enough information. And so through the Givers app, family caregivers can access on-demand training. It's video-based where they can go to a topic that's of interest to them and go through that process of training, answer some questions, go through a quiz, really learn the information. And so we have various topics, whether it's sort of fundamental first aid, which every caregiver should know, all the way as niche, to fall reductions or infection control. So depending on sort of the situation of your loved one, you're able to find any training that might be relevant to you. And I think what's important is that it's available through our app in sort of doses of micro content. We're so used to consuming Instagram and TikTok and things on our phone. And so that's how we built our training, which is you can kind of swipe through this training on your phone really quick and easy, but at the same time, get that really important information that you need so you can feel confident to show up to your loved one every day. I think the two skills we really try and give people are confidence and competence. You want to have both the mental wherewithal and the mental know-how to show up for your loved one so that when you're there, you can be with them presently, not worried about whether or not you'll be able to handle a certain situation as it comes up.
Yeah, and you hit upon something too as you were talking there, and that is kind of the understanding that our caregiver population is now multiple generations, right? I think we talk now about having 4 generations involved in caregiving in some aspect. You obviously were a caregiver and supporting your parents who were caring for, your aunt, I think it was. And so we do have younger people who consume information and resources and things in a different way. Talk to me a little bit about what have you seen in terms of your population of caregivers that you're helping? Are there certain things are you doing videos, or are there certain things that you felt like, okay, we need to start doing some of this because we are getting a disparate, a wide group, I guess, of people of all ages who are caregivers?
Yeah, that's a great question. One of the things that we found early on as we surveyed the caregivers who we were supporting was, how would you prefer to connect with us? How would you prefer to consume information? And by and large, people wanted self-service tools. They wanted the ability to log into a website or log into an app and do things on their own timeline. And I think that doesn't vary based on how old you are or what sort of tech savvy you have. The situation of caregiving is the same, which is my time is precious and I can only do things at certain moments. And so you need to be able to make things as easy as possible for caregivers to access. So that's how we sort of approach all of the tools that we build, which are, you should never rely on us to get back to you with some information. It's on you to go at your own pace, to take your own time and access the support or take the training that you need. And I think one of the things that we're seeing as we serve more caregivers is that you're right, the population of caregivers is changing. It's starting to skew younger and younger and more tech savvy and tech native even. And so being able to give people the tools that they expect from the Netflixes of the world or the Amazons of the world or any other app that they use on their phone for now this situation that they're in caring for a loved one, I think is also a really great differentiator for givers and a great experience for the caregiver.
And, one other thing that I really like about having a service like Givers is that, again, having been in this world for 20 years now, the one thing I've heard over and over and over, and it's never changed, is I feel all alone as a caregiver. And, I might be married and, have a spouse, a partner, or have grown kids or have siblings or whatever, but I feel all alone in this caregiving journey. And I think Givers kind of gives you that sense of, okay, I've got somebody on my side. And also the care journey can be long and your needs change or your questions change as maybe the circumstance changes, particularly in something like, say, Alzheimer's, where the stages progress with that disease. So I just want you to, I don't know if there's any stories that you can share, but I feel like for caregivers, just having a resource where I know I can get an answer, a question answered, because if we're going to wait for the doctor to get back to us or whatever it is, it's going to be days or, painfully, maybe longer. So can you talk a little bit about maybe some of the stories or share anything along those lines?
Yeah, one of the things we learned early on as we interface with government programs is we have to be a buffer between the timelines that the government works on and the timelines that caregivers need to work on. And so one of the sort of main ways that we work is we're always going to set expectations with you and be straightforward and transparent. We're never going to overpromise on what the government timeline may be, but I think one of the great mysteries of applying to a government program can often be, how long might this take, or when will I hear back? And so anytime we point you to a program or we're doing something that then gets handed off to a government agency or a different partner that is out of our control from a timeline perspective, we always set expectations with you about how long something might take. And then we have a promise when things are in our hands, we're going to move as quickly as possible so that you're not waiting, more than 48 hours to hear back from us on any single question that you might have. I completely agree. I think the sort of loneliness factor of caregiving is very real. COVID, if anything good came out of it, I think really did expose the world of caregiving to everyone, whether or not you were a caregiver, but people were at home where they brought loved ones home from assisted living facilities. People were working from home on Zoom and they had a loved one in the background. And so all of a sudden, caregiving became something that we could talk about and became something that other people who weren't caregivers would understand. And so on top of obviously looking for any resources that are available to you, including on our website, I would definitely recommend, talk to your neighbor, talk to your coworker, talk to your cousin. Everyone has been there, and if they haven't, they will be there. And I think you'll find a surprising amount of sort of empathy for the situation that you're in.
Yeah, it's so amazing. I noticed as I got a little bit older and we were hitting a certain age with my peer group, I'd be at parties and you start to talk about like I'm in this field, so I'd start talking, and all of a sudden the stories would just come out from everybody who's had or was in the experience of caregiving. Um, Last kind of do's or don'ts that our audience should be aware of when it comes to particularly finding these programs and getting paid as a caregiver.
I would say a few do's. Number one, be your own advocate. Ask those questions, even if they're uncomfortable to ask, or if you don't know what's available to you, ask them. The only way to get an answer is to look. Number two, I would say is look for partners that you can trust. There's, a lot of, I think, a proliferation of programs and also companies serving the caregiving population. You want to find a company that has a great reputation, and integrity is really at the core of this entire mission that we're on, because we've all been there as caregivers that work for givers. And so, if you're looking for a company to support you, read their reviews, ask some questions about who they work with, really find out if they're reputable so that you're going to spend your time wisely. And then on the don't side, I would say number one, again, don't feel alone. Don't feel like you can't find someone who either understands what you're going through or may have some resources for you. I think as you mentioned, shockingly, when someone mentions caregiving, everyone else raises their hand that they have their own story. And one of the great things that I've seen is that so many caregivers are willing and able to share their own tips. Oh, I found this great resource, or even a Facebook group or some other support that people are leaning on. So I would say, just in general, as a caregiver, look for the support that you need. Find people who you can trust, and then also just make sure that you're open and honest about what can be helpful to you.
Well, this is such great and valuable information, Max. I can't thank you enough for sharing all of these great insights with our audience. So tell us again, remind us where our audience and listeners can find givers.
Yeah, so anyone in the country can go to www.joingivers.com. They can answer a few quick questions about their caregiving situation and get recommended a really personalized and relevant profile of programs that are available to support them. And in specific states, they may actually be able to work with givers to enroll and then get supported and paid through Medicaid programs.
Wonderful. Well, again, Max, thanks so much for joining our episode.
Thanks for having me.
So great insights from Max on how we can get paid as family caregivers. Really helpful service. I think, again, with so many people out there who are delivering this care, that can be a little bit of a buffer on some of the financial tolls. So now let's move into Well Home Design news. And as I mentioned up front, daylight savings is on November 4th, Sunday, November 4th. I'm sorry, Sunday, November 3rd. Ooh, I missed that. Sunday, November 3rd. Okay, don't pay attention to me. You will be an hour behind, I guess, would it be, or something, or an hour earlier. Anyway, so this is where it's going to get darker, because we fall back. So in some ways, it's getting bad. It's darker out earlier, which is confusing for a lot of people sometimes, particularly for a lot of older adults and those who have dementia. We're going to talk about that. But also, it's great because we get an extra hour of sleep. So let me you guys know me, I'm a history buff. I want to just give you a little bit of what the history was behind daylight savings. So first of all, it was invented in 1784 by Benjamin Franklin, who was a big innovator and inventor. Because he believed that rising earlier, so he created it so that we would get up earlier in the spring, would economize candle usage and save people money. Okay, so that was kind of the reason why it was created. And then, of course, when we push the clocks forward, when we got more daylight, which is not what we're seeing now, we're going to go backwards a little bit. But if we had more daylight during the warmer months, then during World War I, it was part of this global attempt to conserve energy again because of what was going on with the World War. So there was a lot of history behind all of this. I know a lot of people say, hey, why do we have to do this anymore? We don't really work on farms and agriculture, many of us, where, we do need that extra daylight. And, there's some good and bad to it. And as I mentioned, I'm going to go through some of the things that we just need to think about. So during the fall back, which is what we're doing now on November 3rd, Sunday, November 3rd, we turn more to artificial lighting. And so there are some things that we need to know, and this is both good for our own homes, but particularly for our older loved ones. So first of all, I've mentioned this before when it comes to our eyes and how they age. We don't think about our eyes getting older. We think about everything else getting older and creakier, but we don't think about our eyes. Well, here's the reality. At the age of 65, you need 3 times the light hitting that retina and coming in order to see things really properly. So 3 times the light at 65 that we needed at age 25. So right there, you can see how lighting is so critical. And so we need to adjust the lighting in our homes to adapt for that deficit that we have in seeing things in a lighted kind of way as it, goes into our brains. So it becomes really important to have what we call task lighting. So kitchen, where you're doing a lot of tasks, a lot of cutting, preparing, whatever. Obviously the bathroom, again, where you're doing a lot of things, brushing your teeth, showering, getting ready for the day. And then if you, are reading, if you have a reading nook, or we don't like to tell you to read when you're in bed, but a lot of people do. So you just want to make sure you've got good lighting that isn't straining your eyes. So the task lighting becomes really, really critical. We talk about this in terms of universal design and how to adapt some of our older loved ones' homes. When I mentioned earlier dementia, there's something called sundowning or sundowner syndrome. A lot of people have heard about it. It happens during dusk. And we don't really know why. There's still so much research out there. We do know that a person with Alzheimer's has a dysfunctioning circadian rhythm. And very often what you'll find, particularly as a family caregiver, is your loved one will be more active. This is where they get up and maybe wander during the night hours. And then during the daytime hours, they're a lot sleepier. And then during dusk is when the sundowning period occurs. And that's why it's called sundowning. And it's a very awful experience, I think, to go through as a family caregiver. Your loved one can become very paranoid. They can act out. They can cry. They can scream. They're very agitated. Last episode we talked with Barbara Corcoran about Alzheimer's and agitation. This is a part of that kind of syndrome, if you will. So it's a very disturbing thing. And very often, if your loved one's in memory care, one of the only solutions that the staff has is to give them a shot to calm them down. And of course, we like to avoid that as much as possible. So here's some things that are going on. I've mentioned this before. Light therapy lamps are great. And what you do is there's a lot of research being done, so I haven't seen the results yet. But we are hearing good reports on the people that are involved in this study who have dementia or Alzheimer's, if they do 20 minutes a day with a light therapy lamp. So in the same way that we talk about seasonal affective disorder, which is called SAD, and that's for people who live in places where, particularly I think during the winter months, it's very overcast, it's maybe rainy and cloudy and gray. You don't see sunshine, and sunshine is so vital to releasing that serotonin, which is one of our happiness hormones I write about in my book. When you don't get that sunshine every day, you start to, you lose that mood boost. You get maybe into a little bit of a depressive state. So a lot of people who live in those areas will use light therapy lamps. Well, now in the dementia community, we're using the light therapy lamps to help try to overcome this sundowning syndrome. And so when you get more light, even some of the artificial light from the light therapy lamps, I know I don't like to talk about artificial, anything, but you can't sometimes get out, particularly during the winter, into sunshine. So if you use the light therapy lamp 20 minutes a day, and you do it maybe in mid-morning or lunchtime, and your loved one absorbs, again, that vitamin D that we get from light coming in, sunlight coming in, boosts our serotonin, it might and has been seen to overcome some of the then really downhill slide into sundowning. Now, it's not going to absolutely maybe take care of it, but it might help. Something to consider and to try. The other thing that you can do is to make sure that before the sun starts to disappear during that dusk hour. So when it's even still light outside, you may want to kind of close the drapes, turn on the artificial lights within the home, because this transition is less disturbing for people with dementia. It's only when they see that light disappearing. So there's something that's going on there with, circadian rhythms. But when it's more, okay, let's just shut the drapes, turn on the lights, that seems to help overcome a lot of that agitation as well. So there's some little tips out there. And again, we'll refer and have on the episode guide page that organization that Barbara Corcoran is helping to be the spokesperson for around agitation and Alzheimer's. And then, of course, driving at dusk. Okay, so again, as our eyes get older, we need more light. There's not a lot of light at dusk. And in fact, contrast, which is what we need to see, the curb from the street or the lanes in the highway or whatever it is, the streets, street lights, street signs. When we don't have as much contrast, and this is something that also happens because we need more light and we're not getting it as an older adult, then we need to adjust and adapt. And one of the ways that you can help your loved one be a safer driver, and you can do this too, is to wear yellow tinted glasses. Now, this is not like the yellow mirrored glasses. You have to be careful. You have to really get the right kind. We'll have a couple resources for you on the episode guide page, but you want to get the yellow tinted glasses because what that does is it really creates that contrast between even colors that are similar, but it really makes different colors and different nuances pop, so you can see roads, signs, you can see lanes and stuff better. So that would be my advice in terms of your loved one is still driving, but they're older. They're going to need those glasses, particularly if they're coming home, during that dusk hour. And then, as I mentioned, we're going to get an extra hour of sleep. Yay! Because sleep is so good for us. So we know that, fall back actually now can be good for us. So it's something to celebrate. Get an extra hour, even though it gets darker earlier. And, I write a lot about sleep in my book, and I'm not going to go into it because we do a whole episode on sleep. You can go back and check those episodes. This year, I think we talked to Wendy Troxel, who talked a lot about sleep. But, blue light emissions, which again goes back to that artificial lighting, is not good for us, particularly when we're trying to get into sleep mode. So I talk about in the book how to really swap out your night lights and your loved one's night lights for the fall hues. Think of it that way. So it's the amber, orangey, even red lights that you put into your bedroom, bathroom, hallway to get to the bedroom, bathroom. It'll illuminate so you don't fall. You see things, but it doesn't tell the brain to wake up. It's daytime, because it might be 2 a.m. when you're getting up. You don't want to wake up. So the red, orangey, amber lights keep the brain into that sleep mode that help you be safe. So check it out. Those lights are very inexpensive. I have them now in my house. I love them. They're really wonderful. I also want to just segue into an announcement that was made by Samsung. And they announced just a couple of months ago the Smart Things Family Care app. And it's actually right now only available on Galaxy smartphones. So it's supposed to be coming out, I think, on iPhone, but it was launched just a month or so ago on Galaxy smartphones in August. But it's really tailored for the older population and for their family caregivers. And so it's a service called Smart Things where you connect all of your digital and, kind of more electronic stuff in the home. They're connected on this app. So that's one thing that really helps. And then you'll get activity notifications. So again, you'll be able to gauge, is my loved one up? Are they still in bed? Why is that happening? Something might be going on. Medication reminders, your loved one will get a little alert. And again, if they have the phone or even on the Android, and other types of smartwatches, so they'll get those alerts. But really, it's just more about being more in tune with what's going on with your loved one. So it's really helpful for family caregivers. Now, my understanding, because it just launched, is that it won't necessarily connect with other devices and things that maybe aren't Samsung. So if you have an LG TV instead of a Samsung TV, it may not connect with that. So we'll check this out a little bit more because we're going to be doing a whole tech segment in our January episode around CES when we learn all the new greatest gadgets and things that are out there. So Samsung's going to have a big, huge exhibit there. We're going to find out a lot more and we'll bring that back to you. But I just wanted to mention that because for those of you who are using some Samsung products or are thinking about maybe getting some new things into your loved one's home, you may want to check this out because it's a great way to just connect everything and have it all together. So now we're going to finish up with our pop culture segment, and very exciting. There's different documentaries coming out. We're going to focus on just one this episode, which is coming out from the actor-director Bradley Cooper. So a lot of us know Bradley from all of his wonderful movies that he's done. But this one is called Caregiving. Very simple to remember. And it's going to be broadcast on PBS stations in the March-April 2025 timeframe. So it's not yet out. It was produced by WETA, which is the PBS station in Washington, and that was in collaboration and partnership with Bradley's Leah Pictures and ARC Media. And for those of you who don't know, ARC Media is the production company that puts on the Finding Your Roots program on PBS. And so that's going to be really exciting. And certainly Bradley Cooper is going to get a lot of attention, right? I mean, every time you have a celebrity of that caliber who's talking about caregiving, you're going to get a lot of attention for it. And so during the month of November, National Family Caregiver Month, the One Family Foundation, which is Bradley Cooper's foundation, it's the OFF, One Family Foundation, they partnered with the Caregiver Action Network on the I Care campaign I mentioned earlier. And they're calling a campaign called Care Out Loud, where they're using other celebrities who now have expressed and shared their stories around family caregiving journeys and discussing the importance of caregiver self-identity. So there's kind of a partnership there between CAN and OFF and just getting the word out. Yes, you are a caregiver if you're doing this for a loved one. And how do we get you the right resources? How do we get you the help and support that you need? So it's a real great recognition. Also, I think it's just nice when we're kind of, in some ways, as family caregivers, as I mentioned, we're overlooked. We're performing this remarkable responsibility and care for someone, and a lot of people don't recognize it. We don't get a lot of thank yous. We don't get a lot of, hey, you go girl or you go guy or whatever it is. And this is the month to celebrate you. So the fact that these campaigns are out there, you can get involved, or if you're more private, and I tend to be more of a private person, you don't necessarily want to share your story, but share with the people you love. Make sure that they know what you're going through, because a lot of people may be just not clued in. And the minute they are, they want to help, or they want to at least support you, give you a hug, or, do a little bit more. So when we can share our stories, it's going to help all of us to kind of, get through this caregiving in a way that can be really fulfilling. And I think almost joyful, right? We love that word joyful. And I think caregiving can be joyful. There are those silver linings that we can find. So with that, I'm going to say thank you so much for listening to this episode. I hope you enjoyed all the information and great interviews that we were able to bring to you. A reminder, you can find more information in my book, Me Time Monday, the weekly wellness plan to find balance and joy for a busy life. Or visit MeTimeMonday.com or CaregivingClub.com. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Caregiving Club On Air. Please hit the subscribe button to listen to us on our newest channels, Amazon Music, SiriusXM, iHeartRadio, Pandora, as well as Spotify, Apple and Google Podcasts, and other listening channels. Check out all the resources and article links on our episode guide page at caregivingclub.com. Just hit the podcast tab at the top, and you can email us with comments and questions at podcast@caregivingclub.com. Thank you again for listening. Take care and stay well.